Okay, we're semi-live. Okay,
Yeah.
everybody. We were supposed to be live, but Facebook is acting up tonight. So we're recording this evening. So you're seeing this about maybe half an hour after we finished recording our chat tonight. But everybody, welcome to the Spiritual Cafe Live, where we walk together and support each other on the path to becoming more aware, spiritually aware, enlightened, and inspired. My guest tonight is Jacob Cooper, and I'm just going to call you Jake tonight, okay?
That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Jake is a full-time psychotherapist, a hypnotherapist, a Reiki master. He's also a near-death experiencer, near-death experience survivor. We'll go into that a little bit. Also, he has spoken at the Edgar Casey ARE. Was that in Virginia Beach?
Yes. Yeah. There's a couple of satellites. Yes, that's Virginia
Yes,
Beach. Yeah.
you saw it in actually at Virginia Beach. Awesome. And also, he's spoken at the International Association of Near-Death Studies.
Yeah.
So welcome, Jake. I'm so glad you could join me tonight.
Thank you so much, Laura, for having me on. I've been following your work and your show, and it's just an honor to be here, having a nice, uplifting conversation during these challenging moments. So really, really, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for taking the time to be on. I know you're very busy nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Us healers, are, but it's a calling. It doesn't feel like busy. It's what we're here to do. So
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. So where did your journey begin? What set you on this path that you're on today, helping people and helping people heal?
Yeah. My my life has not been a conventional path. I know as a psychotherapist we study psychoanalytical models where you have this stage and that stage and that stage, but for me I kind of had a little bit of a Benjamin Buttons kind of thing going on, where it's just from a young kid I had this near death experience. And so at 3 years old I had this experience, which we'll get into, and that really opened me up. And then, as we all are when we're born in this world, at least in the Western world, there's a spiritual deprogramming that happens once we kind of hit the shores, where it kind of like tries to get us to be a part of the material world and takes out a little bit of that spiritual awareness. And so for me, my near-death experience really awakened me from the slow slumber that I think we all have had at some point in our life, where we forget where we came from, and we are very much planted in this lifetime, and the finite becomes the infinite, and the infinite became the finite. Is
Yeah.
just, it's kind of weird. So I had a bit of a different upbringing, to say the least, from that shakeup period. Yeah.
So so you were so young. You're like Ingrid, Ingrid, who I spoke with just a few days ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very young to have that kind of insight.
Yeah. I think there's a parallel association with age and wisdom. Um, and so I think really what I learned was the spiritual world isn't um, kind of linear in a way. I think the idea is to keep that as we grow older, so that we kind of sage while age, so to speak.
Mhm.
But a lot of times people go backwards, within, they get older, but they get younger spiritually. Um, so I really do believe that we're here to not remember, but because we already remember, but re-remember, our true home, our true nature within this experience. There's, we always kind of say, put the mind, body, and soul together. But that to me doesn't just mean sitting in a yoga position, but that's really practically taking the physical, which is this earth realm, and putting our eternity within this earth realm. And so there's a ripple effect from our existence, and that's not through personal accumulation, but really assistance of others, and really shining this light and allowing the infinite to be through our physical beings here. I think that's really what we're here to do. So
So what would you suggest to someone who, I mean, I know a lot of people who come and sit in my office. They've had a sudden awareness of things, whether it be a loss of somebody in their that's close to them who's passed away, or they themselves have had a near-death experience, or they've just realized that something just isn't quite right, and they realize there's something more, like they've had a sudden awakening of some kind. As a psychotherapist, oftentimes I'm sure you've seen it, that sometimes it can really throw people off, like to the
Mm.
point where they lose ground mentally, and they wonder if they're, I mean, I think they're actually getting more aware mentally
Mm.
in a healthy way, but they have to kind of gain ground with that. Does that make sense what I'm trying to ask? Like, what do you
Yeah,
suggest?
it's hard because I notice like a lot of people have a hard time letting go because we're used to analyzing. So I kind of give an analogy. I'm a sports guy. It's hard to shoot a basketball if you're sitting on the bench and analyzing, the game. And so I think sometimes when we're having these experiences, it's, the analysis could kind of happen after, but we have to kind of let things happen not to us, but through us, and not judge so much. But I think it's also a projective stigmatization, against all these things that we inherit, where we think we're having a psychotic break, and for some people that's real and authentic. But I think we're so used to our comfort zone of constricting, and holding, letting go for a lot of people is foreign. And, that's not just with spiritual evolution, that's with our life. We tend to sabotage our lives by holding on what we do know, which is a shell that may not no longer fit us, to kind of avoid letting go of that shell and going into a new one. So really that comfort is something that we need to, that discomfort, is something to kind of embrace, because I wish it went another way with evolution, and change. But you look at just the physical body, that there's a dynamic between, pain, and growth. And that's kind of what this is about. So it's interesting, but I try not to enforce anything as a psychotherapist. I do believe in meeting my clients where they're at, and entering their world, because that's really how you understand. Otherwise, you're not listening. You're talking at, not to. So I try to enter their world as much as possible. Yeah.
So this is a good segue into what's happening right now, because obviously, a lot of people, a lot of us are actually dealing with things we've never dealt with before, and our familiar is unfamiliar, and our schedules are unfamiliar, and we don't know if we're going to go back to what we were used to. So I'm seeing some people actually thriving in this environment. It's actually opening doors for them where maybe they needed a push through. And then there's some people who are just really struggling with the sudden changes that have occurred. What can you suggest to people?
What I would say is, everyone from the human level has a struggle within this. If you're saying like, I'm free, I'm easy, you know, that might be, but that might be an outlier. I think in general, it's a struggle for us all. I just think it's about the approach towards struggle. If you're embracing the challenge, if you're seeing the challenge, not as a burden, but an opportunity. And so I think this really kind of tests our foundation and our principles that we're standing on and have worked towards, and our ability to entrust that versus our fears. I think wisdom and faith over our fears, so to speak. But I also think it's important to be able to sit with that pain and not judge it, and just allow it to pass through, because it's a roller coaster. We're not going to be sunshines and rainbows all the time in our life. And we're programmed that, from like Disney World to all these commercials where we want to get to the Z part of life and that lasting image, but we don't fall in love with the journey. Kobe Bryant once said, the dream is not in the end game, but it's in the experience, it's in the journey, it's in the hard work. And the late Kobe Bryant, and that's something that I try to embrace is the struggle, because that is going to lead us to really open up and grow. So it's a cocoon period where we're all, really kind of growing and retreating to kind of really, once things open up, we can never enter the same. And that's a good thing for a lot of people. You know.
Exactly. So,
Does that make sense? I don't know what your thoughts on that, but it's, I think
yeah.
everyone's got a different take, and what I try to do is to not set in stone a take every day. Try to look at this at a different light as much as we can. But it's kind of like this all just came to us and we were just hit by this wave, and now we're all collectively just trying to process it as much as we can. So,
Exactly. And of course, we're all different levels. I mean, there's people who are literally seeing family members fighting for their life. So that's a whole other challenge and an experience. Well, some others are just a change in their daily routine is,
yeah,
so it can obviously, people are affected in different ways.
that's so true. I mean, we're all facing this, but we're not all facing it the same. 100%.
Yes,
It's not it's not an equal playing field. Some people are in
exactly.
their flip flops and suntanning outside and having their jobs, and others people, God forbid, they've lost family members of their jobs, and so every day I have a prayer grid, and I try to keep the planet and those that I know who have lost lives to this in my heart's of deepest thoughts. So it's a very painful time for so many.
It is, and there's a lot that we can't change right now, obviously, and we just have to let things play out. But as we don't know where this is going and how long this is going to take. But as we start to sort of come back to what we can consider normal, what do you suggest for people as they ease back into that schedule that all of a sudden maybe they realize it's not what's best for them, something that they left and they kind of fought it, and then now that they're not used to it anymore, do you know what I'm saying? Like people are actually getting used to a different pace in their life.
Yeah. I mean, from a mental health perspective, there's a lot of vicarious trauma and acute stress, that's happening through this, where things that we wouldn't even think about, like going to the grocery store,
Yeah.
and someone coming close to us. Now we're all on such high alert, and that's really affecting us all. And so, um, I think, I work as a psychotherapist. I see a lot of patients on a daily basis. I think either journaling or processing this on a daily basis, is important, or finding, if you're comfortable, a recommended psychotherapist. But I would be careful and cautious with who you place your grief to,
Yeah.
making sure that they're licensed and they're credible, because not all anythings are the same. So you want to make sure that from a place of vulnerability, there's that place of trust. But I do believe in the notion that from a material standpoint, this was obviously a shakeup and a difficult point. And this is going to sound controversial, but from a spiritual standpoint, there's a lot more alignment with our belief systems, where I don't think we necessarily came here to pay the bills and to be isolated from each other. I think we came here to integrate with one another, to care for each other, to find and formulate community. That is our nature. And so some people operate out of the material, and some people operate out of the spiritual, where the material seeks to kind of divide and separate, and accumulate, and the spiritual wants to unify, and really understanding that someone else's pain is my pain. There's one, earthly body. So either know that's painful right now. I do believe that has a potentiality, and sadly, sometimes we need these things, on a global scale, to evolve, and unify the planet a bit more. But when you're going through it, it's not something you want to hear. When you lost a job,
Yeah.
when you lost a kid, that spiritual stuff is good, but it bypasses. I got a bill in front of me. I've got, God forbid, a parent that I just lost, a spouse that I just lost. So how does that answer what I'm going through?
Exactly. Yeah, we have to get through it first before we can address it.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm finding there's really no right way to feel either. There's such a mix of emotions with people. Um, so I noticed, like, because a lot of people around me that I associate with were very empathic people and very psychic, and picking up on everybody's anxiety. So when this first started rolling out, I noticed that we all kind of wanted to lean on each other a little bit, but at the same time, we were very aware that we didn't want to lean on each other because it would kind of, be a little overwhelming. So it was such a strange dynamic of needing to talk and needing um, to find a safe place to process our emotions with. But our typical people that we would go do that with, they were also dealing with their own stuff, and they couldn't be that person for us either. So it was kind of a strange place. We were all in a strange place like 4 weeks ago.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, did you notice that yourself in your practice?
Well, it was just for all of us, it was just such a shock. It was really, and it didn't happen like that. It was like slowly, slowly, slowly. And then, something kind of looks big in the distance, but you just kind of ignore it. And then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, it's in front of you. You're like, wow, you're like, whoa. And then, it's like 24 nothing in the game, and you have to kind of play catch up with it all. So, it was a lot that just, through months, you kind of heard rumblings in the background. But, you know, what I would say is it's just so important what you're saying, though, to be able to process this. I think if anything, the mental health system, is very destigmatized through this, through, I think at least local and state leadership where, I saw Governor Cuomo opened up hotlines, and so if anyone's going through a tough time and they're in, their state, you could look up your state's jurisdiction for a hotline. I know in our state, the Office of Mental Health has a hotline, for people to talk to with licensed clinical therapists. But I do believe that was something that I was so impressed by. It was just such a quick response, to understanding how real and tangible mental health is. And so I think the more that we're able to understand that, the more that we could change that. It's like we wouldn't not go to the bathroom for a month straight, right? That would be problematic. But with our emotions, it's not as readily understood, and so people just think they could just hold, and there would be no problem. It'll just go away, in a couple of weeks, and it's got to go somewhere, so.
Exactly. And I think we'll see like several months after this, whatever the new normal is going to be, that people are still going to be dealing with this on some level. So the good thing that I can see coming from this is that there's a further destigmatization, I can't even say it.
It's tongue
for people to seek out help, for emotional and mental help. I think this is a good byproduct of what's happening here, is that people have to reach out, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and being in the field of psychotherapy, I come from a line of about 3 therapists within my family, and so I was, being spiritual, I had my hazards on and going into the field because I thought I was going to be very boxed in and I couldn't do any of this stuff. But, for people who are, into this kind of stuff, what I could tell you is, mental health has really evolved where, I really do believe that they're integrating a lot of these Eastern, principles within psychotherapy. I know, at least within my job, I was given the keys to be able to run about 3 mindfulness meditation groups. And, I kind of, am inspired and trained by a teacher who was trained by, your guy, Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, a local guy, right? From, I think he runs like University of Massachusetts, meditation program, something like that. Mm-hmm. But, there's a lot of spiritual psychotherapeutic principles, right now within therapy. That's not just AA, it's across the board. And AA is great too. I try to, I don't know if you have time to talk a little bit about AA, because I think some principles of AA can really be applied right now. And I think if anyone's familiar with the Serenity Prayer, I think right now in today's day and age, it's just so important, like that discernment, with what's in our grasp, what's not, and the ability to surrender to whatever you call it. You call it God, you call it a higher light, you call it source, a higher belief, and just the distinguishing factor of focusing on what's in our hands, and what's not, and the wisdom of discerning that. While also, I think within AA, you take things one step, one moment, one day at a time, and I think that's so important within this stuff that we're going through. So I just love principles of AA. It's terrific.
Yeah, I think it's good for everybody, really.
Yeah. And you don't have to be an alcoholic or someone who, was in, NA or AA or, substance. It could be applied to any situation. It's so versatile, the foundational principles. That's what I love about it. So, it's great.
Yeah, it's definitely good for what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Guidance and yeah. So with I know you said you do past life regression, which that whole subject fascinates me, and I don't mean to switch gears all of a sudden, but
that's an interview in itself, right?
Yeah,
that's a book, an interview, like a whole career in itself. Yeah,
it is. And how did you get into that? What brought you to that?
As a kid, I mean, obviously having my near-death experience at the age of 3 due to, whooping cough, within my NDE, and I write about this in my upcoming book, there was, a lot of past life memories that I had, and so from after having this experience, which I kind of suffocated, my brain, snapped in half, and that's when the other realm kind of came in. I would have a lot of spontaneous past life recollections. And so as a kid, I didn't necessarily have someone to talk this with. I internalized, I'm a very introverted personality. I'm public yet very private,
Mhm.
and so even though I was seeing a psychotherapist, and a clinical psychologist, from a young age, I didn't find it valuable or worthy enough to speak of because I just thought it was something cool, but I didn't recognize how traumatic it was to have those experiences in the middle of nowhere, and just how helpful it was to process this with. In my later teens, I stumbled across a book by Carol Bowman. I don't know if you know who Carol is. She wrote a book called Children's Past Lives. And within that book, she speaks about her son. Carol was on the Oprah show and she had like a big following. But she talks about her son, and her son, Chase, had past life recollections of, I do believe, the Civil War within her book. And Chase was having all these traumatic experiences and he just didn't know where it came from. And then he was regressed. And from that point of entry of his trauma, of his anxiety, they were able to go to it, that it was beyond this lifetime. And I just, was inspired to really go on a quest, to study, past lives. And I looked at the archives of the University of Virginia, and I studied, obviously Dr. Brian Weiss, Yale trained psychiatrist, and Dolores Cannon of the likes, and, all those pioneers. And
Yeah.
people even forget too, Sylvia Brown was a past life, practitioner too. People just think
Mhm.
of her, on the Montel Williams show as this, platform psychic, but she did past life regression too. So, that to me really inspired me because, I wanted to be able to give over what necessarily I didn't know was accessible to that next person. And so I got trained within, certified hypnosis through a New York State certified program, and then I got a specialization in past life regression. So it's fascinating. I really enjoy seeing what comes out of these sessions. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, can you, I know you have you can't share a lot of what you've experienced, but is there something you could share about an experience you've had that was very profound with a client when it came to past life regression?
Yeah, it's, and also for viewers, if anyone's interested, if you're able to send a link to my Facebook page, I'm going to be having a past life regression on my birthday this upcoming Friday night, 7 p.m.
Happy birthday.
Open up to the public. Yeah, it's been a 4-year tradition of mine to be having workshops, and now it's easier for the public because you get to curl up and, not drive anywhere, not worry about traffic, and from the own confines of your home, my gift to you. But within, usually a lot of groups, I notice a lot of, cool experiences where, a lot of times within groups, I'll notice that there'll be spontaneous recollection amongst participants where after the regression, I'll have participants pointing and looking at each other, and they had just a knowing that they had other lives without even speaking to each other, that they were connected and they both had these so there's that validation, of the experience, of souls. Also, what I notice is, you look at the longest time frames of history, it's likely that you're going to be finding people who have had, past lives in that era, and particularly ancient Egypt is a big one. It's just such a huge era that a lot of people had it. But again, I'm a Taurian, and usually what that means is it has to be kind of tangible for me to believe almost anything. I'm a skeptic by nature,
Mhm.
and so for people to say that they were Cleopatra, I'll say there's about 6 or 7 of them. Which one were you? So then we could have a conversation. But I think the more interesting part is for people, they just kind of think that they're going to have this climactical past life recollection within that experience. But I kind of view it as, something that you touch upon and then it expands. You go nearer and nearer to it, through the dream state or through other subsequent sessions, as also data collection, and just putting the pieces of the puzzle together through your own individual research conclusions. So,
Hmm.
but it's pretty cool. I really, really do like it.
Yeah.
But if you want, there's even a story that I have, because I know you work as a professional medium from my understanding, right? Like I see
Yes.
like you're going to be at the Journey Within soon and stuff
Yes.
like that. So there's a wonderful colleague of mine who is one of the, I mean, I've seen them all. She is top grade medium. She's incredible. But she was telling me that she went to a Brian Weiss, past life regression seminar. And when she was regressed, all of a sudden she noticed that her mediumistic capabilities came through like crazy. And before that, it wasn't happening, and so, I look at past life regression, that same kind of tool where you're accessing the subconscious mind and removing some of those cobwebs, and you're able to really access the infinite a lot easier, and you look at, for instance, Edgar Casey, that's how he stumbled across, his intuitive channeling readings. So it's just fascinating. How
Yeah.
hypnosis works,
Um, what are some situations that you think that having a past life regression would be helpful?
You know, I kind of see hypnosis as a last stop on the train. Like, we've got a reading from you. You went to me for, a therapy session, and you're still trying to assert yourself, but there's just this blockage, and that doesn't necessarily have to be mental health. That could even be physical health. I know Dr. Brian Weiss's daughter is a clinical social worker, and she had issues seeing. She had vision impairments, and having Dr. Brian Weiss, obviously, she separates the father from the professional, so she wasn't going to his workshops. And finally, she attended, and then she could see clearly now, and her vision problems were gone. So, it's not a replacement, obviously, for Western medicine, but it's like when you've tried everything, you went to every doctor, nothing's not working. There's something obviously stuck within your own cellular memory that's holding a blocking. So from the physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, when there's this blockage, I think it can hurt, right? You're
Right.
worst
Right.
comes to worst, you're back where you were, except you had a relaxing couple of minutes with someone. Um, so I think either way, it's important to take the pressure off of it. And that's kind of why I try to do groups, because, if you're seeing me privately, you're paying, like 125, whatever dollars. And so there's that, kind of pressure that you put on yourself. But a group, I charge the same as a meditation. So worst comes to worst, you're getting, probably a more extended meditation, for that same price. And so it's a good deal, I would say, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it takes away the pressure that you put on yourself for the service, so.
It's going to sound like a really, well, maybe not a strange question, but um, because I noticed you don't have it listed on your website, but do you consider yourself a medium?
I think we're all mediums, much like we're all pianists, guitarists. We could all play that, but not everyone professionally comes out saying that they're in the Rolling Stones or they're the Beatles or stuff like that. So as a kid, I had, I walked around like a little George Anderson kind of after the, if you're familiar with George, one of those
Yeah.
big, or John Edward, local John Edward. It's funny, like a lot of these big psychics are from Long Island, I noticed, not just Teresa, but John Edward and James Van Praagh, I know, is from Bayside. And, it's funny that the correlation with New York's and mediums, but
In Boston too.
yeah, you got yourself, you got John Holland. It's,
Joe
got a lot.
Shield. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's, yeah.
You got, within inner cities, you get a lot of these big
Yeah.
wigs, but, I had this a lot as a kid, I just came on a daily basis, and this is in my book. And kind of later, I had to get a lot more left brain to just survive, with the school systems and, how they just wanted me to be that way. And then after, high school is when things started, really opening up again energetically. And so I have it, but I don't come out professionally as it. But when I do give healings, stuff kind of happens. But what I don't know if you could attest to this, but at least evidentially from my near-death experience, once my brain shut down, that's when I was in the other realm, and so I shared this kind of post today. The body and the brain, is really a filter of the light within us, kind of standing behind us. And when that filter is very clear, and cleansed and relaxed, that's when that light just flows through us and it shines through us. And you call it spinning wheels, you call it chakras, whatever you do, but I find really the brain is that filter between two worlds. And so I'm finding when I'm more relaxed, that's when things happen. When I'm tight and tense, it's like you're just focusing on your breath. You're not hearing, and feeling as much. So I don't know if that makes sense with you as a
Oh
professional
yeah.
medium, but
So
the more
so
relaxed I
you
am, the more it comes in.
oh yeah, you can definitely, especially if you're doing Reiki work. I can imagine that
Oh,
you're probably sensing a lot of energy around people, or spirit stepping in, or energy stepping in.
yeah, and I think this is what I've observed also. A lot of mediums I find, it's the kind of messages that come to them,
Hmm.
and I could be off. I don't study mediums professionally, but I kind of find in a way it just kind of correlates a lot of too with personality types. I've noticed that like people who are more, let's say, cop-like, or just that blue collar cop-like, they're going to come out with more of the stuff like saying, okay, this is what happened, this is how they died, just very factual.
Yeah.
Whereas the more empathetic personalities will be able to kind of expand the message as it relates to the individual. I mean, me personally, having that really familiarity with life after death, I know, and don't get scared. I don't tell anyone this, but I kind of like, that's like my specialty where I notice when someone is about to go, I often have, what's called a shared death experience, which is another big,
Hmm.
topic in itself. One of my great mentors of mine, Dr. Sharon Prentice, actually wrote a wonderful book on her shared death experience. But I've had this with even medium friends of mine, who I was in, this is in my book, I was in Provincetown, Cape Cod, and I had a medium mentor of mine, and, he was talking to me. And it's kind of like, when someone's talking to you, you're operating on the same field, but then there's this other radio station in the
Yep.
background subtly happening
Yep.
as that person's in front of you.
Hmm.
And so while we were talking, we were in Provincetown and Commercial Street, and the beaches were around, and I just noticed like a soft breeze, in a visitor, in a door opening between two worlds of a father stepping through, and his father, and telling me that he's going to go soon. And I thought he was crazy. I didn't believe it. Sure enough, a couple of months later, as I was about to give a past life regression workshop, he passed. And his last words to me were, a good friend is someone who's always there for you, even if your car breaks down, they will go anywhere. I just thought that was like a cool message, whatever. And the night that he died, literally my car wouldn't start. And I had to get it towed. And he was there with me the whole time. I kind of felt him there with me. So love never ends, love never dies. And then eventually my battery's about to get jumped, much like he would jump all these batteries. So signs and symbols and spirits, they have no time, and they just almost tap into another time. But it's just kind of funny how personality corresponds with messages in a way. I don't
It's
know if that
true.
makes sense. So
Yeah, because of the it's sort of like if you're you're looking through the windshield of your car, that's your life, right? The experience that you've had in your lives. Um, if you tend to be more, like a cop, like the example that you mentioned, you're going to be more, okay, just give me the facts,
this is how they
that's
died. This is their death. It
right.
was this and this spine. And well,
Yeah.
that's great. For some people, I'm like, you know, I think there's this obsession with death, and a lot of that is, people follow Christianity, they focus on the cross and the death of Jesus, but there's not enough emphasis on life. We all
Right.
focus on that end game.
Yeah.
And so for me, having my own near-death experience, I don't focus on that point because that point is
Exactly.
such a small moment in time. We're
Yeah.
eternal beings. And what I really focus on more is a celebration of the soul and its endless journey,
Yeah. Exactly.
versus that small temporary moment of rebirth,
Yeah.
when it just opened up and awakened to another realm. So,
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I've had people in my life ask me, so how can you do this work all day long, talking to the dead? How depressing is this?
right, right.
And for them, it's depressing, but for me, I feel like it's life affirming.
Mm,
You know?
yeah, I notice within any helping, within the helping industry, there's two roads, because a lot of it has to deal with chi energy. We're taking in all this energy. If as a therapist, as a psychic, comes from a green light, emerald light of healing and, a higher plane. But, if you're not working on yourself and cleansing, you're taking on all that stuff. And, I find so many people, they're so quick to help out others. They have this obsession because in a way it's escapism from their own stuff. And they have to constantly stimulate by deflecting focus on themselves. And I've done some research, and even my friend who passed away, I didn't know this, but was a full blown alcoholic. and I had no idea. And it was from cirrhosis to liver that kind of spread to,
Mhm.
whatever. And so, but you look as far as the Fox sisters, right? Or a lot of these other mediums, it's not just spirits they talk about, which, Native Americans talking about spirits to get into an alternate state, but there's, a lot of association between, spirits and alcoholism, because it's a form of self-medication or grounding kind of thing, because it's very
Right.
hard for them to have this radio and television on all day and still be in this world. It's hard.
Yeah.
I can't imagine,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And that's part of, I think, part of the human journey of anybody who is the healer path in this lifetime, no matter what the profession is. But there's the, working or say, for example, if we're talking about mediumship, anybody who's working towards being a medium or progressing in that way, there's always the human side that has to progress at the same time. Like we have to
Yeah,
work
yeah,
on our
yeah,
own stuff, and we have to work on both at the same time, because if one, it gets stronger and one is not dealt with, it topples over. So I
yeah,
feel like the physical and the spiritual have to be worked on at the same time.
yeah. Everything. That's so true, and we can't
Yeah,
bypass the human part.
exactly.
And that's, I'm sure why you like the way that the way your work too, in a sense that yes, you're accessing loved ones, but you're able to ground it to that person's current circumstance, and that's so healing. And that's what I love about mediums, where I find my work as a psychotherapist is great, but I find within hypnosis and mediumistic work, at times that message, is worthy of almost 10 years of the work that I would do in a way. But that doesn't mean that those 10 years aren't of value.
Exactly.
They're necessary. Those are the roots, but at least within the darkness, there's this tangible light that you see, and that's why I really love and respect your work and medium's work so much. And I think I kind of look at it like an army. There's the Air Force, there's the naval base, there's all these things. And so we're all, and sometimes we juggle hats, but it's all that same light at the end of the day. It's just different styles, of it, and different routes, but the intent is the same. And yeah, I think cross multidisciplinary, and I'd like to see more of the fields coming together more. And I do see them between
Yeah.
psychiatry, psychotherapy, mediumistic healers. I do see that shift happening. I really
It
do.
is. I really do. I'm seeing, like I'm seeing more therapists working more holistically
Yeah,
and working that way. And I've actually had clients who were referred to me by their therapist because they felt that that would help them.
yeah,
So yeah, it's
yeah.
good.
I
It's good that
think
we're all
it's
working
it's about
together. So
it's about respect and seeing outside, of our box, and seeing that there's other ways, and it's not a one size fit all. And
yeah,
like we spoke before, we wouldn't build the attic of the house first. We build the basement, but we need other rooms too, and all is important. The branches of the tree are just as significant of the roots. They're all connected. But yeah, it's a different ball game. I don't know if you remember this, but people who had, mediumistic capabilities. I was reading in books, and I don't want to get into specifics, but there was some high prolific mediums whose parents wanted to put them in the psychiatric hospital,
yeah,
because they were thought to have, schizophrenia, or, bipolarity, or there was like a manic phase. They just thought it was psychosis, when really,
yeah,
there's a saying by one of my good friends, Pat Longo, that says, "You're not sick, you're psychic." And a lot of times that's true, where people are judging themselves as sick. And yes, there's definite truth within schizophrenia, and
yeah.
paranoia, and all that is real. But I think a lot of that times it's misdiagnosed.
I
Um,
agree.
so it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I know that I've heard of that happening in the past, especially people I know who their parents, like it seemed to have been passed down, this ability to hear the other realms, the other dimensions, and their parents were the ones that were considered like not well, and then it's the children that are recognizing the
Yeah,
ability that's been passed down to them. And yeah, so it's interesting how times have changed and how it's become more acceptable, and people are seeing for what it is, rather than
sure.
automatically an illness. So not to say that doesn't exist, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot more mediums pop up, because I think parents now, are embracing that a lot more, and they're
Mhm.
not shunning that. you just kind of wondered how many future John Edwards or, James von Proggs or John Hollands of the world could have been, if in the way, their parents were more open to it and they were empowering and not disempowering. So that parental role is important. But at times, I think, you find sometimes a parental role isn't there, but they'll have like a grandparent come in, or spirit will kind of orchestrate someone from the other side to push them. And
Mhm.
so we've all had that within our lives. And so it's not just the nuclear part that we're, attached to that can make or break us. Certainly I was born in a great family, but it wasn't embraced. But I found within different spots I had, even I found a second cousin of mine is a professional psychic and a near-death experiencer out in Tucson. I had no idea.
Wow.
So I think if you look far enough, you'll find a lot of stuff in your own backyard,
Oh yeah.
that's there that you just overlook and just think, oh, that person, they have to be, on this big, program on the Maury show or whatever. They can't be a relative, but if you look far enough, they're there.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Um,
in my family too.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely. I know that, relatives that have had really unusual experiences, so I can see it. I can see it kind of traveling down through the family tree. Good.
Yeah, I think that's a part of the divine orchestration where, in a sense, you can't have everyone exactly like you, but I think, within the pre-birth plan, if you do believe in that, and, certainly I experienced memories between lives of that, um, we kind of pick pockets of not just spiritual guides, but guides on the earth plane,
Mhm.
and angels in human flesh. And so, it was all, there written in the stars long before we were here, just in terms of the setup of it in those deep connections. So, yeah.
Absolutely. It's not a mistake that of the family that we were born into.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. As much as
Yeah.
we want that to be the case sometimes for some people, but it's, there's reasons, there's
Exactly.
purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, if we dig deep, there's definitely reasons there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a quote by Ram Dass who once said, the late Ram Dass, who once said, if you think you're doing well, just look at your relationships with your family. That will humble you.
Yeah.
And so that's not a one size fit all, but at the end of the day, it's like your family kind of knows, you in a way, and it's a good way to humble you. I oftentimes watch Neil Donald Walsh talk, and he'll have Eckhart Tolle next to him, and he'll be like, "All right, he's the guy who really walks this. I don't. Just ask my family." And so it's important that people understand that we're spiritual teachers, but we're also human beings too. We're not,
Absolutely.
this image that we put out. We try to live up to that to our greatest capabilities,
Oh
but we are
yeah.
far from perfect. We're,
Absolutely.
we're all trying to just figure it out and come back to home one day at a time. So,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know. It's like there's been times I've done a session with somebody because I do psychic intuitive sessions and I also do mediumship, and there's advice that comes out of my mouth that fits just right for my client, and they go, "Oh, that's for me too." So,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so true. And sometimes you're listening to this, you're like, was that for my client or that was for me?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
both, we're
Like
helping out
both.
each other.
There's
It's,
no
it's, it's,
mistake.
it's a seesaw, but really,
Mhm.
with, I don't look at myself as helping a client because I look at it as a seesaw. When you're with someone, that client you're learning from. The most challenging clients are inspiring you to get better. And so it's not
Yeah.
one side helping out each other. It's a mutual form of assist. I don't know if you find that too, but I
Yeah.
find that I learned and inspired most by my clients. Those are my
Oh,
greatest teachers.
absolutely.
So it's not like I'm up here, they're down there. It's a seesaw. It's a mutual kind of seesaw
It really
kind of
is.
exchange. So.
Yeah. I mean, I'll do that with my teaching as well. When I'm sure you see that when you're teaching, that you learn just as much as you're
Yeah.
teaching it, right?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, the Socratic method is great. Especially those QA part. I think gals are a little bit different. They're able to like multitask a lot more, where guys are like just see one thing and that's it a little bit more. I
Mhm.
don't mean to like gender stereotype, but at least for me, it's like I see one thing. So the questions I find within the presentations open me up to saying, oh, okay, I can look at this from this angle too. It just doesn't have to be this way. So that's what I love about, presentations. They really do open you up to, looking at things differently in evolving a message too. So,
Absolutely.
uh,
Yep. Yeah. I learned just as much by the people that I'm speaking with. And yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, very good. So if anybody would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I have got a professional page, Jacob Cooper, LCSW, but I also have a webpage. It's www.jacoblcooper.com. I'm going to be revamping in the next couple of weeks, but it's still up there. And if people are wanting support during this pandemic, or if they're inquiring on services for themselves or a loved one, I'm here to support. It's a good way to stay in touch and follow up. Because I am working on my first book, and which is exciting. I do
Congratulations.
believe Spirit told me in the fall. This is a weird time because they're trying to wait out the right time to release it.
Mm.
You're like, should I release it when everyone's home and going through a difficult time, or should I release it when, the world opens up? But, we'll just kind of have to see where things go. But, I am with a publishing company out in California, and, I'm just very blessed with that situation. So
Wonderful. We'll keep an eye on your website to see when the book comes out.
yeah, the book is about my own near-death experience and lessons from the light and angles to look at, the experience that I had on the other side as a tool for grief or just from a grounding standpoint, really allowing that light of the tunnel to be found within, not somewhere that we have to wait to, and really empowering people on their spiritual journeys. So, I just hope it could give a little something to someone that would be helpful, because I don't know about you, but how many of us have benefited from that little book in that library that we decided to open up that had dust on it, and
Yeah.
we read it and it changed our life. And so I think really, that's what our soul's about. If we're playing the music within our soul, as Wayne Dyer would say, we can never die with the music, as long as it's playing. We don't want to die with it still in us. And
Yeah.
so I think a book is a great way to have like an album release of what's in you. And I do believe everyone's got a story in a book, and it's important to share that, because it might not be that I will speak to that top tier, student in a way, but everyone has a teacher. Everyone has a different, person that you're meant, and contracted with. And so I think it's
Absolutely.
so important for everyone to get out there. There's no time. If there's anything that I'm learning from this pandemic, it's not a time to wait. It's like we're all used to kind of cruising by. We'll say 5, 6 years, I'll do this, but
Yeah.
it's just the present moment. That's important. So
Good. Good. I look forward to reading it.
thank you so much, Laura. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And so if anybody would like to also connect with you when you're teaching that class online, what was the date of that again?
Yeah. So what's my birth? Okay. April 24th. I'm not getting older. I'm not losing my hair. I'm not 64 years old, as the Beatles would say. But yeah, it's April 24th, the same day as Shirley MacLaine.
Really?
She was a big teacher of mine.
Oh,
um,
wow.
424, and it's at 7 o'clock, Eastern Standard Time, and that's on my personal page. So, people could feel free to add me on Facebook at Jake Cooper, my personal page, and that's where I'll be having a past life regression as well as a talk about reincarnation, and it's kind of crossover with this current juncture in time, kind of like a spiritual insight through past lives and reincarnation, and it's implications for this moment. So
Absolutely. Sounds great. I'm going to be there. I'll be there.
I'm honored. I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Thank you. So,
Yeah.
so again, Jake's website, jacoblcooper.com.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Very
That's the
good.
site. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight and to speak on all these topics. I think they're very timely.
Thank you, and I just bless your audience for taking the time out, and just my thoughts and prayers go with everyone right here, right now, and we know it's difficult, but I'm just very thankful for someone like Laura for having such a wonderful program, out there, and we're I know she's doing, like the rest of us, the best that she can. So thank you all
Yeah.
for listening, and just our thoughts and prayers are with you during this difficult time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Take care. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you. God
All right.
bless.
You too. Bye-bye.